Hello, and welcome back to Horror Drift Stories. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading them. If you enjoy drifting into dark and unsettling stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. I was 10 years old when my grandma came to live with us. It happened about 6 months after my granddad passed away. Looking back now, I can understand why she came. She was alone in that big house of hers, walking from room to room, with only memories and sorrow. Even though my mom tried to argue, my parents decided to bring her into our home. And honestly, I was happy about it. Grandma was loud, warm, funny, and she loved me more than anyone else in the world. She always had sweets in the pockets of her apron, boiled candies that smelled like honey and mint. She would slip a couple into my hand every time she passed me in the hallway. And no matter how much trouble I got into, she would always back me up. She would tell my mom I was just a boy with imagination, even when I definitely deserved the scolding. But what I loved most about her were her stories. Grandma lived a long life, and she carried a lot of experiences inside her. She told me stories about growing up during World War II, about running down the beaches on the South Coast after being evacuated, about friends she used to have, and the strange things they did to pass time. Some stories were sad, some were funny, and some sounded like adventures from a book. But the ones that stayed with me the most were her scary stories. She had a lot of those. She used to say she and her friends tried Ouija boards when they were teenagers. They played with tarot cards, told fortunes, whispered spells they found in old books. Most of her stories I would forget after a week or two. Some made me laugh because they didn't feel real, but there were a couple that hit differently. I was 10 after all, and Grandma had a way of making the shadows in the room feel alive when she spoke. Before telling me a scary story, she always turned off the lights in my room. She wanted only the glow of the moon to shine through the curtains. She would sit close, so close I could see every wrinkle on her face and smell the sweetness of the candies on her breath. Her deep blue eyes would catch the moonlight, and she'd stare straight into mine until my stomach tightened. She definitely gave me nightmares a few times. But years later, there's only one story that stayed with me, one that never faded. The story of the shower, and the thing she called Mr. Long Fingers. I remember how it started. One night I asked her why she liked baths more than showers. Back then, she loved taking long baths. She would light candles, burn incense, and lie in the tub humming quietly to herself. She stayed in until the water turned cold, and it drove my mom crazy. She would say things like, "She's going to flood the bathroom one day," or "She's going to fall asleep in there." But Grandma just smiled. When I asked her why she loved baths so much, she told me it was the only place she felt safe enough to relax. The only place she didn't have to keep her guard up. You know, people like me, who are, well, more sensitive to certain things, and we have to take baths, she said seriously, as she scooted closer on the bed. I could never spend that long in the shower. Too risky. The way she said those last two words made my skin crawl. I pulled the blanket closer to my chin. She stared at me with those sharp blue eyes, and I knew she was about to tell me something she shouldn't tell a 10-year-old. Risky? I asked. She turned slightly, looking out my window for a moment before she spoke again. She liked creating suspense. I could feel my heartbeat picking up. It's only risky if you close your eyes, she said softly. If you close them for more than 10 seconds. My mouth went dry. Why? What happens? Do you know that game you kids play in the playground? She asked. The one where someone turns their back, and everyone else tries to sneak up on them? I nodded slowly. Think of the shower like that. Think of Mr. Longfingers like one of those kids sneaking up behind you. A cold feeling crept up my spine. Who's Mr. Longfingers? Her lips pressed together as if she regretted saying his name. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. No one really knows, she whispered. Some say he's a creature attracted to the heat and smell of humans in the shower. Others think he's something darker, something that slips into our world through the steam clouds. And the only people who ever saw him, well, they're not around to describe it anymore. My pulse thumped in my ears. Why not? She didn't answer my question directly. Instead, she put a warm hand on my blanket. Don't worry about that. Sweetheart, she whispered. All you need to do is follow the rules. What rules? When you're in the shower, don't close your eyes for too long. 5 seconds is safe. 10 seconds is pushing it. Anything longer. I swallowed. Then what? If you keep them closed too long, you might feel something in there with you. Something standing close. And if you pass 15 seconds, what happens? That's when you might hear a noise, she said softly. A tap, tap, tap on the glass. Light, gentle, fingers drumming on the shower door. She paused. If you ever hear that sound, promise me something. What? Promise me you won't open your eyes. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept imagining a pale face pressed against my bedroom window, staring in at me through the darkness. And when I finally fell asleep... Story 2. When you spend several hours a night, 5 nights a week, driving through the back roads of rural Tennessee, you end up collecting stories without asking for them. I've been delivering pizzas in a small mountain town for years now, and it's a job that teaches you things you don't expect. When I first started, I thought the hardest part would be dealing with customers or rushing to complete orders on time. But I quickly learned the biggest challenge was something simple that I had never given much thought to: directions. In town, your phone works fine. But once you head up those dark mountain roads, your signal disappears, and your GPS turns into a useless decoration. Before I was hired, I had to prove I could actually read a map. A real paper map. I remember thinking that was ridiculous. Now I understand why they insisted. The older drivers warned me about the things I would experience out there. They said it casually, like it was normal. Voices calling to you from the trees. An abandoned house in the woods that ordered once a week. The same time. The same food. But no one ever waiting at the door. They talked about the feeling of something sitting in the back seat of your car when you drove too slowly at night. They said sometimes you'd look into the rearview mirror and see something staring back at you. Their rule was simple. Don't acknowledge it. Don't look too long. Don't react. But the story that stuck with me the most was about the people who lived deep in the mountains. Not the townspeople. Not the weekend campers. They meant people who were born out there, raised out there, and lived by their own rules. People who stayed hidden. People who watched you from places you didn't know existed. Out of all the stories, that one seemed like it might have a grain of truth, but I still didn't believe them. I thought it was all just part of some weird tradition, scaring the new guy. I learned pretty fast that none of it was a joke. I've seen things I can never explain, things that make you doubt your own memory even while they're happening. Things I still can't talk about without feeling a cold pressure in my chest. But the story I always come back to is the first time I realized the old drivers weren't lying. I had been working for a little over a week. My shift was almost over. It was 10:47 when the phone rang. I picked it up and started the usual greeting. "Hi, thank you for calling. Is this going to be?" I stopped talking because the only thing I heard on the other end was loud, grating static. "Hello?" I asked. "Hello?" I dragged the last one out, trying not to sound irritated. Nothing but static. After 5 more seconds, I hung up and muttered, "Freaking kids!" "What's going on?" Gavin, the night manager, asked from across the counter. "Some kids are prank calling," I said. Phone picked up and it was just static. "What number was it?" I didn't understand why that mattered, but I told him. He frowned and shook his head. "No. She just gets nervous with new people. She'll call back. I'll take the order. I'll let her know you're the new driver so she won't give you trouble." Almost as soon as he finished talking, the phone rang again. I stood beside him as he answered, and while he talked normally, taking the order like nothing was wrong, all I could hear from the receiver was that same harsh static. It felt impossible that he didn't hear it too. When he hung up, I asked him if he was messing with me. "I could still hear it," I said. "It was the same static." He just laughed. "What are you talking about? That was Ms. Mary. She's one of our regulars. She orders a few times a month. Good tipper." His easy tone didn't help. I thought maybe the whole staff was messing with me, hazing the new guy. But it meant I had to take the delivery, and I didn't want to argue. He made her order, a small pizza and breadsticks. "She always pays in cash," he said as I headed out. "You'll be fine." Her house was far from the store, not even in town. Deliveries after dark were always the worst ones. The roads were narrow, twisted, and completely unlit. After a while, it became nearly impossible to tell one turn from another. I checked the map before leaving, but the mountain roads can shift in your mind at night. They blend together. After a few miles, I realized I had no idea where I was. I pulled over on the side of the road and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. "Great," I muttered. "No service, lost, and all for some stupid hazing prank." I picked up the map and tried to find my route again. But as I sat there in my car, the night pressing against the windows, I felt something worse than frustration, a feeling I had never felt before. A heavy, dreadful weight that seemed to settle right on top of me. My heart sped up. My breathing grew shallow. "Calm down," I whispered to myself. "You're lost in the dark. That's all. Chill out." But then I looked up through my windshield, and that's when I saw it. A figure in the road, not far away. Too close. It stood in the beam of my dirty headlights. It looked human, sort of. but something was wrong with the proportions. The head was too narrow, the neck stretched too long, too thin, too still. I jerked my eyes away. What the fuck? What the fuck? My chest tightened. The old driver's voices echoed in my mind. Don't acknowledge. Don't react. Was this what they meant? Was this actually happening? My hands shook as I shifted the car into drive and made a clumsy U-turn, tires crunching on gravel. I drove faster than I should have until I reached a road I recognized. I pulled over again, breathing hard. I should go back to the store, I said to myself. Tell them I couldn't find the place. It's not even a real order anyway. But if I turned around without even trying, I could lose my job. And I needed that job. I looked at the map again. After a minute, I realized where I messed up. One wrong turn, that's all. So I got back on the road. 15 minutes later, I found the house. To my surprise, it looked normal. A little run down, sure, but warm lights and decorations made it seem almost welcoming. Maybe this whole thing really was nothing. I walked up the steps and knocked. The door opened almost immediately, and a little old woman stood there smiling at me. Oh, you must be the new delivery driver. I'm so sorry for being rude on the phone. You startled me. Her voice was gentle, her smile wide. She seemed harmless, but something about her expression made my stomach twist. Something in her eyes, something that felt too still. Oh, no worries, I said. Got your food right here. She took the pizza and breadsticks with the same wide smile, and only then did I realize she hadn't blinked even once. Thank you, sweetie, she said. I appreciate you coming all this way late at night. It's customers like you that keep us in business, I said awkwardly, wishing the words would disappear as soon as I said them. Your total is 15. Without looking away from me, not even for a second, she reached one arm inside the house, grabbed two $20 bills, and handed them to me. Keep the change, she said, and I'm sorry again for the phone trouble. Oh, thank you, really. Are you sure you don't want change? Of course I'm sure. Have a wonderful night. And then she started walking backward, deeper into the house, never looking away, not blinking a single time. I walked back to my car, feeling a cold ripple run down my back. I got inside, started the engine, and looked up. She was still there, staring at me from the window, lit only by a small flickering light, maybe a candle. I gave a weak wave, hoping she'd at least move away. She didn't. She stayed perfectly still. I left fast, faster than I should have. I didn't stop until I reached the store again. Gavin was waiting near the door. How'd it go? Took longer than I expected. Got lost, I said quickly. My bad. Well, did she tip you? Yeah, I said, brushing past him. She tipped great. I didn't want to talk about anything else. Not the static, not the figure in the road, not the woman who never blinked. I clocked out fast and headed home. Do I really need this job? I asked myself on the drive. The answer, unfortunately, was yes. The pay was too good to throw away, and I kept telling myself there had to be a normal explanation for everything. Now, years later, I'm still delivering pizzas in those mountains, and I've collected more stories than I'll ever be able to tell. Some blend together, some still wake me up at night, and some, even after all this time, feel too unreal to put into words. But they happened. Story 3. When I first bought the house, I thought I had found something special, a real bargain. It stood on the edge of a small village, a little far from everything, surrounded by empty fields and an old wooden fence that leaned from age. The listing mentioned that the house had been damaged in a fire years ago, but the price was too cheap to ignore. I imagined peace, quiet nights, and fresh air, a break from everything I wanted to escape. When I arrived for the first time, the silence struck me. No noise, no cars, no city sounds, just the soft push of wind moving through tall grass. The house itself was old, the walls showing faint black marks like shadows left behind from the fire. But it felt solid. I spent the next few weeks fixing it up. Fresh paint, repairing the roof, sanding the floors. The smell of paint filled the place, but whenever it rained, that faint scent of burnt wood returned, like the house still remembered the night it almost died. The neighbors were kinder than I expected. An older woman showed me the only bakery in the village. A man helped me carry in tools when he saw me struggling. Kids watched me from across the street like I was something new to stare at. Everything looked simple, almost too normal. That first night, after finishing some unpacking, I heated a frozen pizza and sat on the couch. I just listened. No sirens, no traffic, no people yelling outside. Only the creak of old beams settling and wind slipping through the chimney. I told myself, this place feels right. The next day, I walked through the village. It was small. A bar, a bakery, a barber, a small square with a fountain that barely worked. Everything looked like it had been stuck in time for 40 years. People said hello politely, their voices soft, but something hung in the air, something heavy and hard to place. A quiet tension I could almost feel on my skin. That evening, I decided to explore the attic. Between dusty boxes and furniture covered in sheets, I found a small wooden chest. Inside were several VHS tapes, each neatly labeled with dates and events. Harvest Festival 1990, Thanksgiving 1991, Christmas 1993. Nothing strange about them at first glance, but I felt uneasy holding them. Maybe it was the idea of watching someone else's memories. Maybe it was the attic's cold air. Or maybe it was something deeper. That night, I gave in to curiosity and slid the first tape into my old VCR. The footage was old and grainy, but the scenes were clear. People laughing, dancing, sharing cake, kids running behind them. The same village, but younger. The same square, the same buildings. Something about it made me feel like I was watching ghosts of this place. A moment frozen in time. I wondered who filmed it, and why they left the tapes behind. Then someone knocked on my door. I jumped off the couch. When I opened the door, an elderly woman stood there. Gray hair, sharp eyes, a polite smile that seemed friendly enough. "Everything all right?" she asked. I nodded and forced a laugh. "Yeah, just got startled." "I'm Mrs. Miller," she said. "I live across the street." She waved and walked off. Normal, harmless. Yet something in the way she looked at me felt strange. It lingered in my mind long after I closed the door, almost like she already knew exactly what I'd been watching. A few nights later, while I worked late, I played the second tape, Thanksgiving 1991. This one wasn't cheerful. It showed the same field, the same people, but no one was smiling. No one was talking. They stood completely still. silent, their faces blank, their bodies unmoving. When the cameraman slowly turned, the people stayed locked in those strange, stiff positions. I turned the tape off. A cold shiver ran straight down my spine. Around 3 a.m, I noticed movement outside my window. I pushed the curtain aside just slightly. There were people standing in the yards, dozens of them. Men, women, even small children, all facing upward, all staring at the sky, not moving, not shifting, not speaking. The moonlight washed over them, and not one person blinked. I watched for what felt like a long time. My heart thumped so loud I could hear it in my ears. Eventually, I closed the curtain. I lay in bed telling myself it was a dream or a half-asleep hallucination. The next morning, everything looked normal again. Kids laughing, people waving, doors opening and closing. But every time I looked out, someone seemed to be watching, only for a second, only long enough to make my skin crawl. That evening, I went to see Mrs. Miller. Her house smelled like tea and warm wood. I told her what I had seen. The people outside, the strange tapes, the night they stared at the sky. She just stared at me for a long moment, her expression tight, like she was choosing her words carefully. "You shouldn't have bought that house," she finally said. I asked her why. She explained that years ago, the village had a ritual they still followed. Once a month, everyone gathered outside. They called it the Night of the Look. No one was allowed to sleep. No one was allowed to turn away. Everyone stared upward, always upward. But one man refused. The man who used to live in my house. He called them insane, mocked them. A few days later, his house burned. No body was ever found. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I asked if she still took part in the ritual. She hesitated before answering. "I go out," she said softly, "but I stay in the shadows. When they look up, I look down. I move when they freeze. I make sure they don't notice me." Before I left, she placed a shaky hand on my shoulder. "If they think you're like him," she whispered, "run. But do it quietly." After that conversation, she avoided me completely. Everyone did. People who once greeted me now crossed the street. Others turned away without speaking. Conversations died when I stepped near. Their warm welcome had vanished overnight. Then one night, I heard footsteps inside my house. Slow, careful, a weight shifting on old wood. Someone was inside my hallway. I opened my bedroom door, my heart hammering. I saw a dark shape slip around the corner and disappear down the stairs. I ran after it, but the back door was already open. Outside, the garden was empty, just darkness and swaying branches. The next morning, Mrs. Miller stood at her window. She stared directly at me. Then she shook her head slowly, warning me without words. I spent the whole day researching the fire that had happened here. Online, there were only a few old mentions. A missing man, a mysterious blaze. But one sentence made my blood run cold. "They say the village took him." That night, I woke to soft footsteps outside my window. Then voices, whispering, chanting words I couldn't understand. When I pulled the curtain aside, they were there again, all of them. But this time, they weren't staring at the sky. They were staring at me. Their faces were empty, drained of expression, pale in the moonlight. In one window across the street, I saw Mrs. Miller. She was crying. shaking her head again and again before she turned off her light and disappeared from sight. Then came the knocking. Soft, almost polite at first, then harder, faster, stronger. I grabbed my bag and slipped out the back door. Behind me, wood began splitting. Voices whispered my name from inside the walls. I ran through the garden and into the forest. Branches scraped my arms. The cold air filled my lungs. The sounds of footsteps and whispering followed me deeper into the dark. After what felt like hours, I reached a small clearing. A cabin stood there with a weak yellow light coming from inside. I rushed toward it and pushed the door open. 3 people were inside, 2 men and a woman. Their faces showed pure fear. One man stepped forward. "You saw them too, didn't you?" I nodded, shaking. "How long have you been hiding here?" "Days," he said. "Anyone who starts asking questions ends up running." Before I could respond, we heard footsteps outside. Slow, many of them. The woman peeked through the window. Her face went pale. "They're here," she whispered. The young man who had spoken earlier stood up. Too calm, too steady. "You can't run from them," he said quietly. He opened the door. They were waiting. Dozens of villagers standing in perfect stillness. I didn't think. I just moved. I jumped through the back window and sprinted into the woods again. I don't remember how I made it out. I just kept running, my legs burning, tears blurring my vision. Now the sky is getting lighter. I'm hiding in an abandoned factory, crouched behind rusted crates. My hands are shaking as I write this. I can hear them outside. I don't know if they've seen me yet, but I know one thing for certain. They won't stop looking. Story 4. I won't go into full detail about why I was thrown out of my house at 16. Part of it was money. We were poor. My parents wanted me to get a job, and I wanted to stay in school. That caused a lot of arguments. And I also made the mistake of telling them something very personal about myself. Something I should have kept hidden. I'm not going to say being on the street was better. It wasn't. But being away from that house, from that toxic mess, was like being able to breathe again. I lived in a pretty big town, and there were a lot of kids on the streets. At first, I tried to find somewhere to stay. I spent the last of my money on cheap hotel rooms. That didn't last long. Very quickly, I had to choose between having a bed or having food. I was stubborn at 16. I hated asking for help. I hated the idea of going to school and telling a teacher or counselor what was going on. In my head, asking for help meant losing. It meant admitting I was weak and I couldn't handle my life. I didn't want my friends or my teachers to know I was homeless, so I dropped out. It was a stupid decision. I can see that now. But back then, it felt like the only choice. The school hadn't exactly made me feel cared for. Kids were bullied all the time, and nothing changed. Teachers showed up, did their job, and went home. I couldn't imagine them suddenly caring about my situation. I didn't want pity or fake concern, or someone pretending to understand when they clearly didn't. So yeah, I ended up on the streets. But I wasn't alone. There was a kind of community of us. Street kids, runaways, throwaways, kids kicked out because their parents were toxic or abusive. Kids who left because staying felt worse than anything else. We didn't have much, but we had each other. You see homeless kids in movies sometimes. They're shown as clever pickpockets or funny little thieves who can outsmart adults and survive by being wild and free. That's bullshit. The kids I knew weren't brave like that. They didn't run around stealing wallets. Most of them were scared of getting caught or hit or locked up. If they saw money or food lying around unattended, yeah, they'd grab it. But they weren't running some cool criminal operation. Movies like to make it look exciting. In reality, it's just sad. It's cold. It's hungry. It's lonely. I ended up on the south side of town with a group of kids. Ben was the one everyone listened to. He wasn't much older than us, but he was tougher, smarter, more experienced. People called him the leader, even though we were just kids sleeping on concrete. Ben was the latest one to disappear. Before that, there were rumors. The child catcher. That's what people called it, or him, or whatever. I didn't believe in that crap at first. I thought it was just a scary story older kids told to freak out newbies. But soon it started to feel real. Too real. Because kids really were going missing. I grew up in a toxic house, but I was sheltered. I didn't understand how dangerous the world could be. Kidnapping, real kidnapping, was something I saw on TV. It was a plot in a show, a headline in a news story, not something that could happen to people I knew. But then kids I recognized started to vanish. Carly, a street performer who played songs and sang under the bridge, trying to earn enough money to get out of town. Jason, the weird kid with the eye patch who once tried to steal my phone. These kids weren't my close friends, but they were part of my world. They made the streets feel less empty. Carly always smiled when she saw me. Sometimes she'd share a donut some old man gave her in the morning. Jason always lurked around the music stores, asking people for change, making stupid jokes about bands. We didn't talk about anything big, but our small conversations made me feel less alone. When Jason disappeared, that little bit of normal started to crumble. His purple wool hat was gone. The corner where he usually stood felt strange, without him there. Carly was always easy to find. She sang under the bridge most afternoons, her voice echoing through the park. I used to fall asleep near the entrance of the park hearing her sing. She sounded like she belonged somewhere better than this town. When she went missing, everything felt colder. No matter how many times I rubbed my hands together, shoved them under my coat, or curled into a ball, I couldn't get warm. My socks had holes. My shoes were falling apart. The cold sank in deep and stayed there. What really made it hit was when some random guy took her spot under the bridge. He played guitar and screamed out terrible covers of pop songs. The sound just reminded me of who wasn't there anymore. When Ben vanished, I stopped treating the rumors like stories. "White van got him," somebody said. That's what everyone started repeating. A kid claimed he'd seen Ben being dragged into a white van. Normally, this kid was known for making up wild lies to get attention. But it made sense. Too much sense. Ben, Carly, Jason, most of the kids who disappeared, had all been last seen at the homeless shelter. The shelter wasn't exactly a safe place, but it was one of the few places we could go. It had hot soup and coffee and places to sit down. There were bathrooms and a few broken showers we could sometimes use. There were charging stations for phones if you got lucky, and they actually worked. I knew it might be dangerous, but I still went. I needed a place to warm up. I needed food. And honestly, I needed people to know I existed. The shelter was where most homeless kids showed up at some point during the day. I tried to connect with well-known kids, the ones everyone else listened to. It was basic survival. If something happened to me, if I vanished like the others, I wanted someone to notice. But not every homeless kid is kind. I won't go into every detail, but I learned very quickly that I couldn't trust most of the kids I thought I could. My first phone got stolen. Then my shoes disappeared while I was asleep. Every time I tried to open up or be friendly, I lost something. I toughened up. So when Charlie showed up, I told him to fuck off, at least at first. Every connection I made had cost me something: money, food, belongings. The worst thing you can be as a street kid is nice. If you want to be left alone, you have to make it clear you're not to be messed with. Without Ben keeping people in check, things got chaotic. I got a reputation as someone gullible, someone who would fuck with anyone, someone too trusting. Most of the spots I used to sleep or hide in got compromised. People knew where to find me. So I ended up going to the shelter again, even though I was trying to avoid it. My plan was simple: get food, get coffee, get out. I had the library as a warm spot until it closed at 4. After 10, the owner of a Chinese takeout place let me curl up in his doorway. I think he felt bad for me. I was past worrying about pride. At that point, warmth mattered more. The shelter kitchen was run by volunteers. Some of them were my age, which I actually preferred. They didn't know my backstory. They didn't care enough to ask. Perfect. They had cold curry and soup that day. I picked soup and a chunk of stale bread. The coffee was lukewarm, but it was still coffee, and it still helped. I was trying to eat quickly so I could leave. That's when he sat down next to me. He was like a human golden retriever. Dark brown hair under a hood, freckled cheeks, bright eyes. He carried his bowl of soup like it was the best thing in the world. His jacket and shoes were obviously expensive brands, the kind you don't see on street kids. That alone told me everything. He looked like he had walked straight out of a perfect suburban home. Loving parents, a warm bed, hot meals. He did have grease in his hair, and his clothes were dirty and worn out now. There were holes in his gloves, and dust streaked on his face. So yeah, he was clearly sleeping rough. But that jacket, those shoes, he was begging the street to eat him alive. "Take that off," I said through a mouthful of bread. That was all I said. I didn't want to say hi. Saying hi is an invitation, and I didn't want to invite anyone into my life. I was already on my 3rd phone by then. I wasn't about to risk anything for some wide-eyed kid. He blinked at me, confused. "Huh? Your jacket," I said. "Put it in your backpack, idiot." I wasn't trying to be mean. I was just warning him. I'd made the same mistake. I used to have my dad's expensive watch and some nice shoes I bought with money from a summer job. I lost them because I wore them openly. 2 girls, Elizabeth and Mari, who I honestly thought were my friends, stole them from me. Now they strutted around town, wearing my things like trophies. The kid next to me still had that soft, gentle look, eyes wide like a frightened animal. I had no idea how he'd survived even this long. If he was sleeping at the shelter, he was warmer, sure, but he was also more exposed, more visible to whoever was taking kids. "Unless you want to lose it," I added. Finally, something clicked. He hesitated, then took off his backpack, slipped out of the jacket, and stuffed it inside. After that, he sat there shivering, and I sighed and gave him one of my spare sweaters. Street kids usually only help you if they want something in return. I was waiting for him to name a price, but he just grinned and said, "Thanks," and pulled it on like it was no big deal. "I'm Charlie," he said when I stood up to leave. I told him I hadn't asked and said it was nice meeting him in the most obviously fake way possible. Then I headed out. At first, I thought he was just going the same way. Then he followed me down an alley, and I realized he was actually following me. I was ready to tell him to get lost. But when I looked at him, he just looked lost. He tried to act tough, but he couldn't pull it off. He didn't look like someone who would steal from me in my sleep. I never officially invited him to join me. It just kind of happened. When we got to my sleeping spot, Charlie dropped his bag and unrolled his sleeping bag right next to mine, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I took advantage of it, of him, of his kindness, of that strange innocence he still had. Nights felt endless and brutal. Midnight and dawn felt like they were years apart. I was never fully warm. My toes were always numb. My fingers constantly felt like they didn't exist. But somehow, with Charlie there, it wasn't quite as unbearable. I told him to go get food for the night. He came back with 2 pizza rolls and a can of soda for us to share. I asked how he'd gotten them, and he just shrugged and gave me that goofy grin. He always acted like he wanted everything to be some mystery. I didn't care how he got the food. I cared that we had something to eat. Slowly, I stopped seeing him as a problem and started seeing him as a friend. He was loud. He was annoying. He talked about his dreams and goals, about getting off the streets, about having a future. It was hard to hear sometimes. Not because I didn't want those things too, but because hope hurt. But he made me smile, even when I was freezing and starving, even when things felt impossible. Charlie never told me why he ended up on the streets. Whenever I asked, he changed the subject and pushed the conversation back to me. I didn't notice how self-centered I was being. I told him my whole life story, all my pain, all my anger. Whenever he tried to open up, I found a way to turn it back to myself, like it was a competition over who had it worse. He never snapped at me for it. He just listened. He always listened. One day it was snowing, thick, cold flakes falling nonstop. The city was covered in white. We sat together on a wall, with our legs dangling over the edge. I don't know which of us thought sitting out in that weather was a good idea, but I weirdly enjoyed it. I shouldn't have. Snow is dangerous when you live outside. It kills people slowly. It creeps into your bones. But it was still snow, and I was still a kid. Charlie had found a bag of chips, and we shared it. My fingers were so numb, I could barely feel the crisps. "Do you believe in angels, Finn?" he suddenly asked. The question caught me off guard. He watched a little girl below us making snow angels on the ground. My answer, deep down, was no. I didn't believe in angels. I didn't believe in God. If God existed, my parents wouldn't have kicked me out for liking boys. Back then, I used to pray for help, for some miracle. I used to imagine my mom coming to find me and begging me to come home. That never happened. So no, No angels, no God, just cold. I didn't answer him. Charlie's head slowly dropped onto my shoulder. I flinched and shoved him away. For the first time since I met him, his smile faded. "Sorry," he said quietly. He rubbed his hands together and shuffled a bit farther from me. He said I was warm. The way he said it made my chest twist, because he was warm too, and I hated myself for pushing him away. I liked his head on my shoulder. It felt safe. It felt like something I didn't deserve. I jumped down from the wall, making an excuse about needing to go to the shelter to look for warmer clothes. Charlie nodded and told me he'd wait for me there. His voice calmed some part of me inside. While I was away, I tried to deal with what I was feeling. I realized I didn't want to lose him. I didn't want him to disappear like everyone else. I wanted him to stay. Charlie felt like something close to a home. I went back to the wall, ready to apologize. Ready, maybe. To be honest, for the first time in a long time, he was gone. At first, I thought he'd gone to get food or wandered off somewhere nearby. I waited and waited. The sky got darker. The snow kept falling. My body shook from the cold, but I stayed. An old man was nearby feeding pigeons and pretending to play chess with them. Earlier, Charlie had pointed him out and laughed about how one of the pigeons seemed too smart. I went over to him. "Did you see me earlier?" I asked, pointing at the wall. He nodded. "Looking for your friend?" he asked. My stomach clenched. "Yeah." "Did you see where he went?" The man moved a chess piece, eyes squinting. "I think he walked away with a man, a few hours ago now." Ice formed in my chest. "What man?" "I have bad eyes," he said. "Just a man, maybe late 40s. His expression softened when he saw how scared I looked. He pulled a sour candy from his pocket and dropped it into my hand. "You should go home now, kid. Your parents are probably worried about you." I asked again, harder, angrier. What did he look like? Where did they go? But the man turned back to his game and stopped answering. I went back to our sleeping spot. It was empty. I went to the shelter. No luck. I called his name until my throat hurt. Charlie was gone. At first, I tried to deny it. He could have gone anywhere. Maybe he'd show up again with that same dumb smile and a bag of chips. But days passed, then weeks. It became clear he was just another missing street kid, another name people whispered for a while and then forgot. He was another Ben, another Carly. Only this time, I had made the mistake of caring. Charlie wasn't just a name. He was my friend. Maybe more than that, if I'm honest. I asked people on the street if they'd seen him. Most just gave me pitying looks. Some looked annoyed, like I was bothering them. Others looked at me like I was trash. "Sorry, kid. Haven't seen him. Can't help you. I'm sure he's out there somewhere." They weren't thinking about Charlie as a person. They were thinking about why a kid like him was homeless to begin with. Why he didn't just get help. Here's the hardest thing I've had to accept. On the streets, it's easy to go numb. It's easy to shut down, to stop processing grief, because you're too cold and too hungry to feel it fully. You don't forget the people you lose, but you push them down. You bury them deep so you can keep existing. I didn't forget Charlie. I just pushed him into a quiet part of me so I could keep going. About a month later, I thought I was losing my mind. I saw his jacket, the same one I'd told him over and over to keep hidden. The snow was back, thick and heavy. I was looking for a dry patch of concrete to put my sleeping bag down. I had some hand warmers I'd traded a DS for, and then I saw him. Charlie stood in the middle of an empty road in the dead of night. Same jacket, but he looked bigger, taller. He filled it out more. His face was older, sharper, with stubble on his jaw. He was talking loudly on an expensive phone. I didn't think. I just ran to him and wrapped my arms around him. For a moment, I felt like I'd found something I'd lost forever. He was warm. So warm. "Where did you go?" I demanded, pushing him back to look at his face. He just smiled, and my eyes dropped to his pocket, where I saw an iPhone sticking out. I think I was about to joke about it, ask how the hell he got that, when a hand clamped over my mouth from behind. Another arm wrapped around my chest and yanked me back. I tried to scream, but the hand over my mouth pressed harder. I couldn't breathe. I stumbled as someone dragged me backward through the snow. Before I could even process it, I was thrown into the back of a van. I fell to my knees on freezing metal. The doors slammed shut and shutters slid down. I screamed and slammed my fists into the walls. The engine started, and the van rolled forward, making me fall sideways on the bodies. Bodies. I smelled them before I truly saw them. Rot. Decay. I stayed on my knees as long as I could. Eventually, I had to look. The inside light flicked on, and I saw them. Corpses. Piled in the back of the van. Skin gray and crumbling, bones jutting out. One of them caught my eye. Ben. His face was half rotted, his eyes open, staring at nothing. His clothes were stiff and stained with dried blood. I turned him over so I wouldn't have to see his face. And that's when I saw them. Wings. Twisted, rotten feathers stuck into slits cut along his spine. His back had been sliced open, and something had been sewn inside him. I scrambled backwards, choking on my own breath. Carly was there too, buried beneath another body. I could see her pale blue coat, her yellow hat frozen to her head. She had one half-formed wing sticking out of her back, the rest of it rotten and torn. Near the bottom, I recognized Jason's shoes. I couldn't look at his face. They weren't just missing kids. They'd been turned into something. Something broken. Something wrong. Somewhere outside the van, Charlie's voice floated in. "Do you believe in angels, Finn?" His voice had that same light, playful tone, but something dark twisted around it. I didn't answer. I couldn't. He kept talking, trying to get a reaction out of me. After a while, he got bored and went quiet. I sat there, surrounded by dead bodies and the smell of rot, and I realized, this is how I die. In the back of some van, turned into a failed angel. Eventually, the van stopped. The shutters opened, and a woman stood there, middle-aged, smiling kindly, but something sharp glinted in her eyes. "Come on, honey," she said, holding out her arms. "You're okay now." Charlie stood beside her, arms folded, watching me like he was studying an animal. "Careful," he told her. "He might attack you." He sounded bored, annoyed, like I was an inconvenience. Behind them, a tall man held a gun aimed straight at my head. I had no choice. I let them pull me out. The man quickly jabbed a needle into the back of my neck, and my body went numb. My limbs stopped listening to me. I went limp in someone's arms. The last thing I remember is a bright light getting closer and closer. When I woke up, I was lying on my stomach. I could see sunlight peeking through gaps in a wooden door. The air smelled like hay and animals, a barn or some kind of farmhouse. My wrists were tied. Then the pain hit me. It traveled down my spine like bolts of electricity. It felt like my back had been ripped open. I could feel blood and something else, tugging, pulling, being forced under my skin. I screamed until my throat gave out. I don't remember passing out, but at some point, the pain swallowed me up and let me go again. The second time I woke up, I felt cold metal on my back, a scalpel, stitches, tugging sensations as someone worked on me. "That's all finished," a man's voice said. "The body is almost ready." "When?" Charlie's voice. "You said that last time," he complained. "The last 3 angels died." "Hey, Dad, just admit you're killing them, and you don't know what you're doing." "I said he's ready," the man snapped. "So let him fly," Charlie said. "Come on, I want to see him fly." They talked about me like I wasn't there, like I wasn't a person, just a project. Then they left me alone, for hours, maybe days. I'm not sure. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't think about anything except the pain in my back. At some point, I felt hands on my restraints. "Hey, Finn," Charlie whispered. He untied me. I sat up slowly, shaking. My hand flew to my back. I expected to feel my spine sticking out or open wounds. Instead, I felt smooth skin, stitches, something moving under the surface. Charlie held out my backpack. "Here," he said, smiling wide. "Dad says I'm not allowed to let you go yet, but I'm too impatient." He stared at my back like it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. I didn't say anything. I grabbed my bag and ran. I pushed past him, burst out the barn doors, and sprinted until my lungs burned. No one chased me. No one yelled. When I finally looked back, Charlie was standing in the doorway of the barn, watching me run, grinning. I kept going until I found a road. Eventually, a woman in a car stopped and asked if I needed help. She offered to take me to the sheriff. She gave me tea and food, but I refused. I didn't feel like I needed food. I didn't feel right at all. When we got close to town and I recognized the streets, I jumped out and disappeared before she could stop me. I went to a public bathroom, locked the stall, pulled off my shirt, and looked at my back in the mirror. I could see faint lines and scars running down my spine. I could feel things under my skin, twitching and moving like they were alive. Sometimes, when the pain got too bad, I dug my fingers into the stitches and let them push through for a moment. I never fully looked at them. I was too scared. Then I forced them back inside and sealed myself up again. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore and asked for help. I ran into one of my old teachers, Mrs. W. She didn't ask what had happened right away. She just offered me a place to stay. She let me sleep in her spare room. She tried to feed me, but eating was almost impossible. I could barely keep water down. She took me to the emergency room once, but I had a panic attack when the doctor tried to examine my back. After that, she promised no hospitals unless I said so. Over time, the pain changed. It didn't leave, but I learned how to live with it. I went back to school, then to community college. Now I'm 29. I live far away from that town. I have an apartment, a boyfriend, a life that almost feels normal, but my back still hurts. Sometimes I wake up outside, blocks away from my home, with no memory of getting there, sleepwalking. Sometimes the pain gets so bad I can't lie on my back. Sometimes I feel something pushing against my skin, straining like it wants out. Last night, I was at a train station waiting to go home. It was cold. My back was already starting to twitch, the pain gnawing like it always does. There was a homeless girl sitting in the corner of the platform, shivering. I made myself a promise years ago. Whenever I see a homeless kid, I at least try to point them toward help. A shelter, a youth worker, anyone. If they roll their eyes and tell me to fuck off, I offer to walk them there myself. I stay until I know they're actually inside and someone has seen them. I don't want anyone to be invisible the way we were. I was halfway across the platform, heading toward her, when I noticed someone else. Brown curls under a beanie, a familiar jacket, a familiar way of standing. It was Charlie. He was older now, taller, with a bit of a beard. The jacket fit his broader shoulders. He looked comfortable, relaxed. He was talking on a brand new phone, like he didn't have a care in the world. I took my eyes off the girl for 1 second. 1 second. When I looked back, she was gone. At first, I thought she'd just moved or headed for another part of the station. Then I saw her, far down the platform, weaving through the crowd. A man's hand was wrapped around her wrist, pulling her along. I started to move toward them, ready to shout, to do something. A hand grabbed my arm. "No, Finn," Charlie whispered in my ear. His voice froze me in place. "She has the perfect shape and body for my father," he murmured. I watched, helpless, as the girl was dragged farther and farther away, until she vanished completely. "I want to see you fly, Finn," Charlie said softly. I spun around, but he was gone. When I left the station, I found his old backpack sitting on a bench, the same one he used to carry everywhere. It was empty. I know why he left it there. He was sending me a message. He's still out there, still taking kids, still turning them into something else. I've asked around since then. I talked to a group of street kids nearby, trying to warn them. They didn't trust me at first. Why would they? But they told me something important before they left. 3 guys and a girl had all gone missing recently. The girl had blonde hair. I asked when it started. Their faces changed. They got suspicious. They walked away. I've spent the last week looking for them. For her. I know one thing now. The only way I'm going to find those kids is if I find him. The man who took me. The man who took Ben. Carly. Jason. Charlie's father. And if I don't stop him, he's going to do to them exactly what he did to us. Story 5. The air in the Blue Ridge Mountains was sharp and cold, carrying the smell of wet pine and the faint hint of frost. Michael tightened the straps of his backpack, feeling the familiar pull on his shoulders. It wasn't as heavy as the weight sitting on his chest. He'd told his wife, Haley, that this trip was about finding peace, but he knew that was a lie. He wasn't looking for peace. He was running from the silence at home, from the empty chair at the kitchen table, from the way the house felt wrong without his brother in the world. He stopped at a small overlook and stared out, at the soft blue waves of mountains stretching forever into the distance. It had been 6 weeks since the funeral. 6 weeks since the accident that took Daniel, his brother, his best friend, his other half. Michael took a slow, unsteady breath, then turned back to the trail. He headed down, boots crunching over fallen leaves and loose stones. That's when he saw him. Just off the trail, behind a patch of red sumac, stood a figure. Still, watching. Daniel. Same faded green flannel shirt, same dark hair, same shape. Just standing there in the growing afternoon shadows. Michael's blood went cold. He squeezed his eyes shut and shook his head hard. Grief. Stress. Your mind's playing tricks on you. When he opened his eyes again, there was nothing behind the sumac. No one. He let out a shaky laugh and kept walking, heart still pounding. As he rounded the next bend, he froze. The figure was back, closer now, standing near a twisted old oak tree, facing away from him. Slowly, Daniel turned his head, but there was no recognition in his eyes, no warmth, no smile. Michael saw only wide, dark eyes full of raw, silent terror. "Daniel? Danny, is that you?" Michael's voice came out broken and desperate. The figure didn't answer, didn't move. It just stared at him, those dark, empty eyes reflecting the fear rising in Michael's chest. Michael blinked. Now the figure was closer. It hadn't moved. It hadn't taken a single visible step. But the distance between them had shrunk. He's not walking, Michael realized, but he's still getting closer. He blinked again, just once. Closer. He could smell damp dirt and wet leaves now, and under that, something metallic, cold, old, like rust or dried blood. Michael suddenly understood, in a deep, terrified way, that it didn't matter how fast he ran. Whatever this thing was, it didn't follow the same rules as he did. "I'm sorry, Daniel," he whispered, voice cracking. "I'm so sorry." Then instinct took over. He spun around and ran. He tore down the mountain, crashing off the main path into the thicker woods, branches whipping at his arms and face. He didn't stop until his lungs burned and his legs shook. When he finally collapsed against a tree, gasping for air, he realized he was lost. The trail was gone. The trees were different. The sun was dropping fast behind the ridgeline. Old Boy Scout training crept back into his panicked mind. Shelter, fire, something to protect you. He found a low rock ledge that formed a small overhang and decided that would be his camp for the night. His hands shook as he gathered dry sticks and leaves. Somehow, after a few tries, he managed to get a fire going. The small flames felt like a challenge against the dark pressing in. He took out his pocket knife and cut 10 small, rough crosses from green sticks. He pushed them into the dirt in a circle around the fire, forming a crude barrier. It was childish. It was useless. But it made him feel like he was doing something. When he finally sat back and reached for his canteen, something caught his eye in the dirt just beyond the circle of crosses. There was a faint line in the soil, as if something had been dragged. 2 long, shallow grooves ran side by side, like marks from elbows or knees. Every few inches between those lines was a neat little dent in the dirt, like a fingertip, like many fingertips, like something with too many joints, slowly pulling itself toward the fire. Michael's throat went dry. He gripped his knife, then forced himself to lie down and close his eyes. At some point, exhausted and shaking, he fell asleep. He woke with a sharp inhale. The sky was turning pale gray. Dawn. His fire was nothing but glowing embers. His breath fogged in the cold air. Someone stood just beyond the closest wooden cross. Michael. It was Haley. She stood there in her winter coat, hair pulled back, eyes shining with relief. Haley? He croaked. What are you doing here? I'm not supposed to be back until Sunday. Her expression tightened. Today is Sunday, she said softly. You've been gone 3 nights, Michael. Not one. He stared at her, confused. That didn't make sense. He'd only slept once. He was sure of it. The gentle look on her face melted into something sharp and angry. Stop lying to yourself, Michael, she snapped. You killed your brother. The words hit him like a punch. That's not fair, he shouted. I tried to save him. The rope slipped. An accident, she cut in, voice rising. You welcomed that accident. Daniel was always better than you. Stronger, smarter, more loved. Michael flinched. The words burned because a small, cruel part of him believed them. He squeezed his eyes shut and forced himself to breathe. When he opened them again, he looked at her closely. You're not her, he said quietly. You sound like her. You know what I'm afraid of. But you're not my wife. The Haley shape smiled. It was wrong. Too wide, too sharp. The skin at the corners of its mouth didn't move right. I wear their faces because you won't look at your own, it said. I wear Daniel's fear. I wear Haley's anger. But I am not them. What are you? Michael whispered. I am the shape of your regret, it hissed. I am here because these mountains always demand a price for the peace you beg them for. As it spoke, the first rays of the rising sun crept over the ridge and spilled into the hollow. The light touched the figure, and immediately its edges blurred, its features tearing apart like smoke. In seconds, it was gone. It dissolved into the cool morning air, leaving nothing behind but a fading impression in the dirt. Those same faint drag marks, those same fingertip dents. Michael stood on shaky legs and began to pack up his gear. As he rolled his sleeping bag, his hand paused. Lodged in the stitching was a button, a small, round, emerald green flannel button. The exact kind Daniel always wore. It shouldn't have been there. It was inside the circle of crosses, inside where nothing should have been able to reach him while he slept. Michael swallowed hard and forced himself to move. Rain clouds were moving in, dark and heavy. Soon, a freezing drizzle began to fall. His clothes clung to his skin, and his fingers started going numb. He needed real shelter. He found it in the form of a narrow cave opening tucked into the rock. He ducked inside, out of the rain. It was cold and damp, but at least it blocked the wind. He followed the cave wall a few steps in, letting his eyes adjust to the darkness. That was when he heard it. A weak, broken voice echoed from deeper inside. Help! Is anyone there? Oh God, please, help me. Michael froze. I hear you, he called back. I'm not coming in any farther until I know who you are. What's your name? A pause. Then, my name is David. I was hiking with my dog, Scout. He ran off and I fell. Please, David, hurry. Michael frowned. The panic in the voice sounded real, too real. But the echo made it hard to tell where it was coming from. I need to know you're real, David, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. Tell me the nearest major trail junction to this ridgeline. Silence. Then the voice came again. Michael. His heart dropped into his stomach. You left your wife, the voice said, softer now, almost soothing. Haley's going to worry. Your sons, Royce and Jude, they need their father. Michael's blood ran cold. He hadn't told anyone out here his kids' names, or even that he had kids. The thing in the cave hadn't answered his question. It had just used his family. He turned and ran. He sprinted out of the cave into the freezing rain, heart hammering, legs slipping on wet rock and mud. The wind cut at his face, but he kept going, crashing through brush and half-frozen streams. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to get away. From the cave, from the voice, from the mountain that knew his grief better than he did. As he stumbled over a rise and slid down the other side, a beam of light suddenly cut through the rain. "Whoa there," a voice called. "You all right, sir?" A man in a ranger jacket stepped into view, holding a flashlight. "Name's Thomas. I'm with the park. Your wife called us. Said you missed your check-in, and she was worried sick." Michael almost collapsed with relief. He let the ranger lead him toward a service road where a truck was parked. As they walked, he found himself talking about the hike, about the figure that looked like his brother, about the voice in the cave, about the thing that wore his wife's face. To his surprise, he, Ranger Thomas, didn't laugh. He didn't tell Michael he was crazy. He just listened. "You're not the first to experience strange things up here," the ranger said quietly when Michael finished. Long before this was a park, the Cherokee lived in and around these mountains. They had names for different places. This area, he gestured around them, they called something that roughly translates to the hiding place of pain. Michael stared at him. They believed, the ranger continued, that when grief, guilt, or sorrow became too heavy, some people came here to leave it behind. The mountain would take it from them. The burden, the memory, all of it. And when those people left, they were whole again, lighter. But the mountain kept what they gave it. They reached the truck. Michael climbed into the passenger seat, he feeling oddly light. The crushing weight on his chest was gone. The tightness behind his eyes, the constant ache, faded. He took out his phone and called Haley. "Hey," he said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "I'm heading back a day early. The trip was good. Really good, actually. I feel, I don't know, clear, like a new man." Haley laughed in relief on the other end. He promised to be home soon. As the ranger drove them toward the highway, Michael absently reached for the mesh side pocket of his pack. His fingers brushed against something small and round, a single green flannel button. He pulled it out, turned it once between his fingers, then dropped it into the truck's cup holder without thinking. For a moment, a strange heaviness pulled at the edges of his mind, like he'd forgotten something important. Someone. He frowned and tried to focus, but the feeling slipped away. He knew he'd been sad when he came up here, but he couldn't quite remember why. Someone had died, maybe. A friend, a relative. It felt far away, like a dream already fading in the morning light. He leaned back in the seat as the truck rolled down the mountain road. The trees thinned, The sky brightened. Behind him, miles of ancient stone and forest stood silent. Somewhere up there, between the pines and the mist, the mountain held what he had given it. The pain, the guilt, the memory of his brother, Daniel. Michael drove away, free of his torment, while the Blue Ridge Mountains kept their new secret. Story 6. I know I messed up. You don't have to tell me that. I understand exactly how big of a mistake I made. I replay it in my head over and over again. But at least let me explain how it happened. Let me tell you why I was stupid enough to sign that paper in the first place. She was just so damn cute. That's how it starts, right? Not with some ancient book or a creepy house at the end of the road. With a little girl and a lemonade stand on a hot afternoon. With blonde pigtails bouncing when she moved, and big blue eyes that sparkled like she had no idea how ugly the world really was. She had one of those homemade stands, made from old wooden boards, painted white with yellow lemons drawn across the front in shaky little circles. A crooked cardboard sign leaned to the side. Lemonade 50 cents. Plastic cups. A big glass pitcher with slices of lemon floating on top, and that fake confidence kids put on when they're trying to act grown up. I was walking by on my way to work, tie half done, coffee in hand, late as usual. I barely noticed her at first, but she lifted her head, saw me, and smiled like I was the most important person in the world. "Hey, mister, want some lemonade?" she called, waving her hand so enthusiastically her pigtails bounced. I should have just said no. I should have kept walking. But something in her voice tugged at me, that mixture of hope and nervousness. So I slowed down, turned, and walked over. Up close, she looked even more innocent. Freckles dusted across her nose. Front tooth missing. Pink sneakers with doodles on them. She in the kind of shoes kids take markers to when they're bored. She stood on her tiptoes to see over the counter. "Sure, kiddo," I said. How could I say no to such a professional setup? She beamed at that, cheeks turning pink. She poured the lemonade carefully, tongue sticking out in concentration, like this was serious work. When she handed it to me, her fingers were sticky with sugar. I took a sip. It was way too sweet and sour at the same time, but I smiled anyway. It should have ended there. Instead, she tilted her head and gave me this thoughtful look, like she'd just made a big decision. "Hey, mister," she said, voice sweeter than the lemonade. "You want to partner up? I sure could use the help." She wiped her brow dramatically with the back of her hand, like she was exhausted from all the business. It was like watching a cartoon character. I laughed. "Partner up, huh? And what exactly would you need help with, you little entrepreneur?" Her face lit up, eyes shining in the afternoon sun. "Mama says I should start young. She says if I want to be successful, I need to make connections." She said the last word, like she was proud of herself for remembering it. Then she reached under the stand and pulled out a piece of paper. It was folded neatly into a little rectangle. She smoothed it over the wood and pushed it toward me with both hands. A pen rolled after it. That's where the warning bell should have gone off. A little girl with a contract. That's not normal. But in that moment, it just seemed cute, like some game she was playing because her mom told her about business. "Wow," I said, trying to sound impressed. "A real contract?" She nodded eagerly. "Yup, Mama helped me write it. She says I gotta take things seriously. She stumbled over the word, then giggled. I glanced at my watch. I was running late. Again. My boss was already on my ass about being on time. The smart thing would have been to pat her on the head, say something nice, and get going. But seeing her small shoulders slump when people walked by without stopping, it did something to me. It made me think about how invisible kids can be, how easy it is for the world to just walk past them. So, I said, trying to buy myself a moment, what would this partnership mean exactly? Her eyes lit up. She jabbed a finger onto the paper, right where the dotted line was. It's simple, mister. All you gotta do is help me once a year. Once a year? I raised an eyebrow. This looks more like an all-summer operation. She laughed and covered her face with her hands, then peeked at me through her fingers. No, not all summer. Just one time a year. I just need someone who will promise. I've been asking all day, but nobody takes me seriously. Her smile faltered. She pouted, crossing her arms. They all just walk away. Mama says people are busy, but I thought grown-ups liked helping kids. That hit harder than I expected. There was something in her voice, hurt, confusion, that made my chest ache. I imagined her standing out here in the heat for hours, in being ignored. It felt wrong. Hey now, I said softly. That's rough. People can be jerks sometimes. I took another sip of the lemonade, more out of guilt than thirst. So let me get this straight. Once a year I come by and... Do what? Her smile came back full force. It's easy, she said brightly. You just gotta come on by and buy a lemonade. From me. Every year. Mama says it's an investment opportunity. She rolled the word around in her mouth. I glanced at my watch again. I was really pushing it now. All right, I said at last, giving in. I'll bite. I'll come back here every year, and I'll make sure to ask for a lemonade from you personally. Deal? Her whole face lit up. Deal. I raised the cup to her like a toast. To future business partners, then. She giggled. I smiled. It felt harmless, maybe even sweet. And for a second, I enjoyed the feeling of having made her day a little better. I tipped my head in farewell and started to walk away. Wait, mister, she called out. You forgot the contract. I turned back. She held the paper out with both hands, pen ready. Her pigtails swayed in the warm breeze. She was still smiling that bright, innocent smile. Of course, I said, putting on a fake serious tone. Can't have a business partnership without paperwork. I didn't even glance at the words. Not one line, not one clause. I just took the pen and signed my name on the dotted line where her tiny finger pointed. The ink wasn't even dry before she snatched the paper from me with surprising speed. She folded it once, twice, then shoved it into the front pocket of her overalls. Her hand lingered there for a second. Then she started to laugh. At first it was normal, a little girl's laugh, high and sweet and bubbly. Then it changed. It grew louder, sharper. The sound twisted, warping into something deeper, older, cruel. Her shoulders shook, and her head jerked back, her mouth stretching too wide. The laugh echoed in a way that didn't make sense out in the open air. My smile vanished. Hey, kid, I started. Her head twitched to the left, then to the right. Her body rocked back and forth like a pendulum, like some invisible rhythm was controlling her. The sound of her laughter filled my ears, drowning out everything else. The distant traffic, The birds, the wind, gone. There was only her. That sound, that awful sound. The sunlight dimmed around the edges of my vision, like clouds were sliding over the sun. But when I looked up, the sky was still clear and blue. Her eyes, when I looked back at her, were no longer blue. They were black, completely black. No whites, no pupils, just endless, bottomless dark, staring back at me. There was a wild, burning intensity in them, not like a tantrum, not like a kid throwing a fit, but something ancient and furious, something that didn't belong in a child's body. My stomach twisted. A wave of nausea rolled through me. My legs felt weak. I put a hand out, like I might steady myself against the lemonade stand, but the world tilted, and my hand found only empty air. The taste of lemonade turned to copper in my mouth. Metal, old coins, blood. The last thing I remember from that moment is the girl standing there, head twitching, black eyes locked on me, laughter tearing through my skull. Then my body hit the grass in front of her house. Darkness swallowed everything. When I woke up, I was in my own bed. For a moment, I thought it had all been a dream, a weird, messed up nightmare. My room looked normal. The curtains were drawn just like I always left them. The digital clock blinked the wrong time because I'd never fixed it after a power outage a few nights ago. Clothes in the chair, shoes on the floor. But something was wrong. I could feel it before I opened my eyes all the way. My body ached, every bone, every muscle. My head throbbed like I'd been hit with a hammer. I tried to sit up and felt a pulling sensation on my skin, a tightness that made me hiss through my teeth. When I looked down, my heart nearly stopped. My arms, my hands, my legs were coated in dark, dried mud. Thick, flaking patches of it covered my skin. It smelled like wet earth and something else underneath. Something sour. My fingertips were stained black. Not just dirt, like something had soaked into the skin. My shirt had been cut open and clumsily pulled back together. A long line of uneven stitches ran from my lower abdomen, all the way up to the base of my throat. Rough, messy work, like someone had gone at me with a needle and thread in a hurry. The skin around the stitches was swollen and tender. I could feel each one. Like little knots tugging at my flesh when I moved. My mouth tasted like copper, like a handful of pennies had melted on my tongue. I coughed and spat into a tissue, half expecting to see blood. There was nothing visible, but the taste wouldn't go away. I stumbled out of bed and caught sight of myself in the mirror. I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. My hair was wild and matted, sticking out in greasy clumps. My facial hair, which I usually kept trimmed, had grown thick and messy, like I'd been neglecting it for weeks. My eyes looked sunken, ringed with deep circles. My skin was pale. There was a faint red smear at the corner of my mouth, like I'd wiped something away but not quite clean. I looked older, not just tired, aged, like 5 years had passed overnight. Panic clawed at my chest. I checked my phone, missed calls, messages from work asking where I was, timestamps that didn't make sense if I'd collapsed that morning. My attention was dragged to the living room by a low murmur of sound. The TV was on. I don't remember turning it on. I don't remember coming home. I don't remember undressing, or someone stitching me up, or any of it. The screen showed a reporter standing in front of a familiar neighborhood street. Behind her, Smoke rose from a badly burned house. Fire trucks, police cars, flashing lights, yellow tape. The headline at the bottom of the screen read, "Arson reported at Gainesville home. Suspect still at large." My heart lurched. The camera cut to a wide shot of the house, or what was left of it. The front yard, the sidewalk, the stretch of grass near the curb. I knew that house. I knew that yard. I knew exactly where a certain lemonade stand had sat just yesterday, or what I thought was yesterday. My gaze dropped to my hands, to the black-stained fingertips, to the crusted mud, the shaky, ugly stitches running up my chest. I swallowed hard, throat tight. I squeezed my eyes shut, wishing I could turn off the TV with my mind, wishing I could make the images disappear. The reporter kept talking, words like "no survivors" and "investigation ongoing" floating through the air, like they belonged to someone else's life. Nausea roared back with double force. I staggered to my dresser, one hand on the wall, legs barely holding me up. That's when I saw it. There was a small note sitting on top of the dresser. Just a piece of paper folded once in half. Nothing special. I had overlooked it in my scramble to reach the mirror. My name was written on the front in careful, neat handwriting. Bubble letters, a little heart above the I. My hands shook as I picked it up. The paper smelled faintly of sugar and smoke. I unfolded it. Inside, there was only one short sentence, written in the same childish handwriting. Clean, precise, like a kid working carefully on homework. See you next year. The smiley face had little pigtails. Story 7. There are fog zones in parts of Tennessee, the kind you can't miss because of the huge billboards warning you when the fog gets too thick. Drivers say they've seen all sorts of things in that fog. Monsters, ghosts, strange shapes. In my family's case, we found something else. We found Café Le Dernier Festin. We had been driving all day, tired and hungry, the kind of hungry that makes everyone a little angry and quiet. Our stomachs were growling when we passed an old exit sign half hidden by mist. The sign had a name on it I didn't recognize, and then, painted in faded letters underneath, Café Le Dernier Festin. Google Maps didn't show any restaurant with that name. Neither did Apple Maps. There was nothing. But at that point, nobody cared. We were starving, and we'd been saying, "We'll stop at the next place," for the last 2 hours. So we took the exit. The ramp led onto a narrow road, no streetlights, just the car's headlights cutting through heavy fog. The world outside the windows was nothing but gray and black. After a few minutes, a building slowly appeared ahead, its edges blurred by mist. The restaurant was big, too big for a place hidden in the middle of nowhere. The parking lot was full, cars in every marked space. We had to pull off to the side of the road and park in the grass. Through the fog, I couldn't see the whole structure at once. It felt like the building went on farther than it should. The front doors were huge, twin doors that looked at least 8 feet tall. Standing in front of them made all of us feel small, like kids about to walk into a place meant for giants. We stepped inside and were hit by sound, forks and knives tapping plates, people slurping soup, teeth crunching, low chewing noises. The whole dining room was full, every table taken. It felt like walking into a beehive made of eating sounds instead of buzzing. A waiter was waiting right by the entrance, as if he'd known exactly when we'd arrive. He gave us a big smile and bowed slightly. "Welcome, welcome," he said, voice barely audible over the noise. He led us through the crowded room, weaving between tables, until he found one in the middle of the restaurant. We sat down, surrounded on all sides by other diners. Everywhere around us, people were hunched over plates, eating as if they hadn't tasted food in years. The waiter said something I almost missed over the noise. "But don't worry, everything here is made fresh. We don't prepare anything ahead of time," he said, flashing us another wide smile. Then he placed a single menu on the table. Just one menu. For our whole family. We pulled our chairs closer and leaned over the table to look at it together. The menu was huge, pages and pages of dishes, printed in tiny, neat letters. There must have been hundreds of items. It looked like this place served everything you could imagine. The descriptions were detailed and a little strange. Spaghetti bolognese made with tomatoes from Italy, Chicago-style chili dogs, sushi, French dishes, Southern comfort food, things from all over the world, all on one menu. In a restaurant surrounded by fog in rural Tennessee. It took us a long time to choose, but eventually, everyone picked something. My little sister, small and picky, went straight for the kids' favorite, chicken tenders. When she ordered, the waiter nodded like this was a wise choice and disappeared toward the kitchen. Within minutes, no more than 3 or 4, her food arrived. Golden strips of fried chicken lay piled on her plate, steam rising from them. The breading was crisp and perfectly even, with a smell that made my mouth water. The menu had described them like this: hand-cut strips of white meat, be breaded in a seasoned crunch that bursts with flavors you've never had before when you bite down, served with a dipping sauce that clings a little too eagerly to each chicken strip. She took one bite, and her eyes widened. "This is amazing," she mumbled, already reaching for another. My older brother ordered coq au vin, a French dish with chicken braised in wine. He smirked when he picked it, knowing it was supposed to take hours to make normally. "It'll take forever," he said, rolling his eyes. "But it's worth a try." It didn't take forever. Maybe 5 minutes after he ordered, the waiter came back with a steaming plate, chicken braised until it yields completely to a wine sauce, so dark it reflects no light. Each bite carries a warmth that will envelop your breath and taste buds. We promise the wine will be like nothing you've ever had before. The sauce looked almost black in the dim restaurant lighting, thick and glossy. The smell was rich and strong, and as soon as my brother took a bite, he fell silent, closing his eyes like he was trying to hold on to the taste as long as possible. My mom ordered spaghetti vongole, pasta with clams. The waiter barely had time to write it down before the kitchen door swung open and her plate appeared. Delicate pasta entwined with clams, simmered in white wine and garlic. Each clam tries its hardest to stay closed. But we make sure each yields their delicious contents into the pasta sauce. It came out in about 30 seconds. I stared at the plates in front of my family. They all looked and smelled perfect. The descriptions on the menu matched them almost word for word. And yet nothing about this made sense. So many different dishes, all made fresh, all arriving quickly, all tasting like the best version of whatever they were supposed to be. It didn't add up. I flipped through the menu again, searching for something that would be impossible to make in minutes. Something slow. Something that took time. My eyes stopped on brisket. Brisket is not a fast meal. It's the kind of thing people start cooking at dawn for dinner that night. I flagged down the waiter. "I'll have the brisket," I said, trying to sound casual. Inside, I felt almost smug. There was no way they could serve this right away. The waiter's smile didn't falter. "Excellent choice," he said, writing it down. He turned and walked away. I looked at my family. "Watch," I said quietly. "This one will take a while." I was wrong. Not even a minute later, the waiter was back, laying a heavy plate in front of me. Slices of brisket were stacked high, edges dark and caramelized, smoke ring clearly visible. Slow-smoked over mesquite whose thorns were burned first, releasing a sharp, resinous aroma that settles into the meat. Each bite carries a faint sting of the Texan brush bite. I didn't want to be impressed, but I took a bite, and my doubts faded with the first chew. It was incredible. Tender, juicy, smoky. Better than any barbecue place I'd ever been to. Better than anything that should exist in a foggy patch of nowhere off a silent Tennessee road. We fell into the rhythm of the restaurant, eating, chewing, enjoying. The sounds of the other diners wrapped around us like a blanket of hunger. All of us ate, except my dad. He took a long time with the menu, flipping pages slowly. He watched us eat, smiling a little, but his eyes kept going back to the list of dishes. He seemed more curious than hungry. By the time we were licking the last traces of sauce from our plates, he finally closed the menu and called the waiter over. "I think I'll try this," my dad said, pointing at a line near the bottom of the last page. "What's in the final meal?" We all frowned and leaned in, reaching for the menu to see what he was talking about. Near the bottom, in small script, was a simple description. "Our best dish, eaten alone." There was no other explanation. The waiter's smile twitched. His shoulders shuddered. He looked around the dining room, scanning the faces of every other patron. Slowly, the noise of the restaurant faded. Forks stopped. Spoons paused. The sounds of chewing and swallowing went quiet. One by one, people turned their heads to look at us. In seconds, the entire place was silent. The waiter swallowed. When he spoke, his voice sounded louder now, echoing in the sudden quiet. "Let me see if we have it in stock," he said. "It is the only dish we find. Difficult to acquire the ingredients for." He turned abruptly and walked toward the kitchen, his shoes hitting the floor harder than before, his long steps almost a march. My dad raised his eyebrows. "Guess I picked something interesting," he joked. Nobody laughed. Before any of us could say anything, the kitchen doors swung open again. The waiter came back, and this time someone walked beside him. A man in a priest's collar. They came to our table and set down a plate in front of my dad. It was basically empty, except for one thing. On a small stand in the center of the plate sat a single egg, resting in a white egg cup like a trophy. We stared at it. This was the final meal. "What is this?" my dad asked, annoyance creeping into his voice. He gestured at the lone egg. "Is this some kind of joke?" The waiter shook his head. "It's our best dish, sir," he said. "We assure you, you'll have nothing better in your life." He rested a hand gently on the priest's shoulder, and then gave him a small push forward. "We also provide a priest with it," he added. Customers tend to be caught in the euphoria of the dish. The priest was a small man, barely 5'2", with thinning hair and a timid look on his face. His brown eyes darted between us nervously. When he smiled, it didn't reach his eyes. Yes, the priest stammered. I'm here to help you if you run into any issues, but I will have to ask the rest of your family to wait outside for 15 minutes. This dish must be eaten alone. He swallowed. If you don't like it, we'll cover your entire meal. He tried to sound reassuring, but his voice trembled. Before any of us could argue, my dad held up a hand. I'll be fine, he said. Let me eat the egg, and I'll join you guys outside. Your dad is about to score you a free meal. He smiled at us, confident. He picked up the silverware, ready to tap the egg and break its shell. The waiter gently herded us toward the front doors. When we stepped outside, we found that the weather had changed. It was pouring now. Rain hammered the parking lot and drummed on the car roofs. Thunder rumbled in the distance, but the fog hadn't gone away. If anything, it seemed thicker, so thick that even our car, only a short distance away, was little more than a blurry shape in the gray. We huddled just under the edge of the building, sheltered somewhat by the canopy. The waiter stood in the doorway for a moment, she looking at each of us with an expression that surprised me. He looked sorry. Under no circumstance do you come back in here until the 15 minutes are up, he said quietly. No matter what you hear, no matter what you are told, wait the full 15 minutes. He didn't wait for questions. He slipped back inside, and the heavy doors shut with a deep, echoing thud. My mom checked her watch and started the timer. We stood there in the rain, silent, tasting the last flavors of our meals still lingering on our tongues. I thought about the brisket, the smoky tenderness. It was still in my mouth, in my mind. I wanted more. All of us did. But a free meal for the whole family was a big deal, and my dad sounded so sure of himself. So we waited. 5 minutes passed. Rain soaked the sidewalk. My sister shivered under her thin sweater. The fog seemed to press closer. Then the doors behind us creaked open. The priest's head poked out first, but something was wrong. He kept rising. His neck stretched, climbing higher and higher, until his face reached the top of the huge 8-foot doorway. He tilted his head left, then right, his eyes rolling until they focused on us. He smiled, revealing teeth that looked more cracked than before. Come back in, he said. His voice was wet and thick, like something heavy was lodged in his throat. We're ready to serve you all again. Your father loved the meal and wants to share its flavor with the rest of the family. His mouth hung open too wide. Drool spilled out. Long strings dropping to the floor, splattering just inside the doorway. We couldn't see his body, just his face and the impossibly long neck stretching from somewhere inside the restaurant. The skin on his neck sagged and drooped, hanging like a wilted flower stem. His eyes were wide and fixed on us, and as we watched, red veins spread across them until the whites turned a deep, bloody scarlet. My mom tightened her grip around our shoulders. It's okay, she said, her voice shaking. We'll stay out here. I could feel her fingers digging into my shoulder. I could feel my brother's arm pressed tight to mine. None of us moved any closer to the priest. The priest's smile faded into a pout. He lifted his gaze and stared into the fog, where our car sat invisible. "The fog is heavy today," he said, words bubbling as if liquid sloshed inside his throat. "Come inside. You wouldn't want to go missing out here, would you?" "We'll be okay," my mom said firmly, though her voice trembled. "We'll wait the 15 minutes. She started backing us away from the door, into the rain. The priest's neck followed us. It stretched out of the doorway like a pale, rubbery rope, lengthening, vertebra by vertebra. His head slid through the air, always staying the same short distance from us. His eyes never broke contact. His neck made faint popping sounds as it extended, the skin pulling tight, then sagging again. "Your father would hate to see you so wet and cold," the priest said. Blood had begun to seep from the corners of his mouth, mixing with the drool that dripped onto the concrete. "Come back under the canopy." We stepped farther into the rain, shoes splashing in small puddles, but no one dared turn their back on him. His head kept moving toward us, neck stretching, reaching, following. I felt trapped, like a rabbit staring at a fox, waiting for the moment it decided to pounce. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the rain. Finally, his neck stopped extending. It shuddered like a cable pulled too tight, then held. His face hovered just a few feet from us, rain running down his forehead. "I guess you can stay out here," he said at last, disappointed. Then his neck went limp. His head dropped, hitting the ground with a sickening thud. For a moment, it just lay there, staring up at us with bleeding eyes. Then, slowly, his head and neck began to slide backward, across the wet concrete, as if someone, something, inside the building had grabbed hold and was dragging him back. His chin bumped over the threshold, his hair scraping the floor, his lips leaving a faint smear of red as he disappeared into the darkness behind the doors. The doors closed again. My mom checked her watch. 10 minutes left. Those 10 minutes felt longer than the whole drive that day. We stood in the rain, soaked to the bone, teeth chattering, too scared to move, too scared to speak much above a whisper. When the timer finally beeped on my mom's watch, we all jumped. "It's time," she said quietly. We went back to the doors together and pushed them open. The restaurant we stepped into was not the same place we had been in less than a quarter of an hour ago. The lights were dimmer. Some flickered weakly. The air hit us first, heavy and wet and foul. It smelled like moldy towels left in a pile for weeks, mixed with the copper sting of old blood and the sour reek of animal waste. The tables that had been filled with laughing, eating people were now covered in black mold. Wood chairs were rotten, legs sagging and cracked. Tablecloths were stained and torn. Dust lay thick on everything. There were patches on the floor where the tiles had crumbled away. It looked like the place had been abandoned for years, or decades. We walked slowly, our feet crunching on broken glass and debris. No other voices, no clinking of silverware, no chewing sounds, just the soft echoes of our own footsteps and the drip-drip of water from unseen leaks in the ceiling. Only one table looked different. In the middle of the room, one table still stood upright. On it sat a single dirty plate. In the center was an empty egg cup. The egg was gone. Only flakes of shell clung to the edges. Next to the plate was a folded piece of paper. My mom picked it up with shaking hands. The handwriting was familiar. My father's. She read it out loud, though her voice hardly made it past a whisper. I loved the meal so much I decided to stay, the note said. But don't worry, your father has decided to cover the tab through work. Love you all, and can't wait to see you back in here at Café Le Dernier Festin. That was 10 years ago. I have a family of my own now, a spouse, a child. Sometimes when I look at my kid in the rearview mirror, I think about the way my dad smiled at us before we were let outside. How sure he was, how normal he looked. I still drive through that same fog zone from time to time. Work, visits, trips. Life pulls me along the same Tennessee highways, again and again. Every time, I watch the side of the road carefully. I search for that old exit sign, buried in mist, for a flash of light that might belong to a too large building, hiding in the fog. And every time, I taste that brisket again. The smoky flavor has never really left the back of my mind. It's still there, like a ghost of a meal I never truly finished. Sometimes I dream about it, waking up with my mouth watering, half convinced I can still smell mesquite smoke. I hate myself for it, but I understand a little more now. I understand how someone might love a meal enough to stay, enough to give up everything else. I still haven't seen the cafe again, but I keep looking. And part of me, some dark, hungry part, I try not to admit to anyone, not even myself, wonders what that egg tasted like. Story 8. I still do not fully understand what I saw that night. I only know that it looked like someone had tried to build a person out of another person, and whatever they created was not alive in the way we understand life. It moved, it spoke, it copied, but it felt empty, like a bad echo of something real. I used to read stories on r/no sleep just for entertainment. I would scroll through them late at night, shake my head at the dramatic ones, and move on. I never believed any of it. I certainly never thought I would end up writing something of my own. I always believed horror belonged on a screen, not in a hallway outside my front door. I live alone in a small third-floor apartment building. It smells like old carpet, dust, and fried onions from someone's late dinners. The pipes knock loudly at 2 a.m, like they are clearing their throats. The stairwell light flickers, sometimes staying on, sometimes going dark, as if it cannot decide whether the effort is worth it. The neighbors keep their doors shut and their curtains closed. Nobody talks much. That silence used to feel comforting. It felt safe. One night in October, I fell asleep on the couch with the television on. Some nature show was playing, the kind that makes wild animals look calm and noble. I woke up to a soft knocking sound. Then it came again. 3 slow, careful knocks. My first thought was a drunk delivery driver at the wrong door, but it was 2 a.m. I stayed still. I did not answer. The knocking came again, patient, evenly spaced, like someone counting in their head. I got up quietly and checked the peephole. The hallway was empty. The far stairwell light flickered, not like it sensed movement, but like something was standing between the bulb and the sensor. Before I could think too much about that, my phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text from Mrs. Keller, the elderly woman who lived upstairs. She wrote, "Do not open your door. I heard it too. Stay inside." Another message followed almost immediately. "Do not speak." My stomach dropped. Before I could reply, something slid across the carpet outside my door. It was not footsteps. It sounded like fabric being dragged flat, slow, and careful. Then a voice spoke. Help me. It sounded like Mrs. Keller. It sounded exactly like her voice, and the way she spoke when she asked me to help carry a parcel upstairs. But something about it was wrong. The words were stretched, the vowels too round, as if someone had recorded her voice and replayed it at the wrong speed. I covered my mouth with my hand. Even breathing felt loud. Any sound felt dangerous. The thing did not try to break the lock. Instead, it scratched at the door gently, slowly, like it was learning how wood felt. Then it stopped. For a long time, nothing happened. The silence was heavy. I could hear the water heater clicking inside the walls. My heart beat so hard I was sure it could hear me. I called the police. When they arrived, they were calm and polite. They walked the hallways with flashlights and checked the stairwell. They knocked on doors. Mrs. Keller opened hers, wrapped in a robe, looking tired and confused. She said she had heard something strange too, but that she was fine. The officers shrugged and blamed old wiring, old buildings, city noise. Then they left. After they were gone, I locked my door and sat on the couch with every light turned on. I tried to sleep. I told myself it was nothing, a prank, a neighbor with a sick sense of humor. But the voice stayed with me. Help me. Help me. The words echoed somewhere deep in my chest. Near morning, when the sky outside started to turn gray, something moved near my window. I looked out and saw a dark shape standing in the stairwell near the laundry room. It was small, about the size of a child, but it did not move like one. It leaned slightly, like someone trying very hard to listen. I opened my balcony door just a little. The smell hit me immediately. It smelled like Mrs. Keller's cheap floral perfume, mixed with the clean, sharp smell of a hospital. Under that was something metallic. I gagged and ran to the sink. I am ashamed to say I vomited. After washing my face, I realized I was shaking, caught between fear and a horrible curiosity. When I looked again, the thing turned its head toward me. It had hair stitched together like a badly made wig. I noticed clothes that did not match properly, like they had been grabbed in a hurry. A cardigan with one sleeve darker than the other. Its face was not fully formed. It looked like a suggestion of a face, close enough to be terrifying. I could see seams along its jaw and small stitched repairs on one cheek. Its mouth opened suddenly, and it said, "Thank you." The voice sounded like dozens of quiet recordings layered on top of each other. It did not move like a human. It moved like something trying to remember how humans move. But there were small details that made it worse. A faint rise and fall at the neck, like breathing. A soft shudder that felt like a pulse. It made me believe that something human had been used to make it. I called Mrs. Keller on my phone. It went straight to voicemail. I texted her one sentence, "Are you okay?" 3 minutes later, she replied with a single word, "No." That was when the thing started climbing the stairs. It moved fast, with sharp, jerky motions. It did not walk so much as adjust itself, like parts being rearranged. When it reached my door, it paused. Then it knocked. 3 careful knocks. It whispered my name. It said it like it had read it off a note, mixed with someone else's laugh, someone I might have known once. I sat frozen as its shadow pooled under my door like a dark spill. It tried different voices. It apologized. It begged. It confessed secrets that meant nothing. It used words the way someone tests tools, one after another, until they lost meaning. I realized then that it was copying. It copied speech, sounds, gestures. It copied because it did not understand. At one point, in a voice made from many broken recordings, it said that I needed to be built right. The sentence made sense and did not make sense at the same time. It sounded like a repair instruction and a prayer mixed together. When it finally left, it did not walk away. It folded itself flat and slid under my door, like a coat being pushed through a gap. When the hallway light changed, the shadow vanished. The carpet looked clean, as if nothing had ever been there. I reported everything. The police came again. They took notes. They told me to get a security camera. They suggested I stay with a friend. They said old buildings sometimes attract strange things. I moved out 2 days later. 2 weeks after that, I saw a video online. It showed a shadow in a laundromat in another city, in twisting like someone wearing too many coats at once. People in the comments joked about costumes and art projects. What keeps me awake now is not the memory of the thing itself. It is the thought that something can be made from people and still not be human. That something wanted to look human enough to be trusted. If you ever hear 3 slow knocks at 2 in the morning, do not open the door. And if the voice sounds familiar, remember that copying is not the same as being alive. Story 9. I have always enjoyed walking at night. There is something calming about it, especially in a town like mine, where everything shuts down early. By 10 in the evening, the streets are empty, the shops are dark, and the only sounds left are the distant hum of the highway and the soft singing of insects. When the humidity drops, the smell of the cornfields becomes sweet and clean, almost comforting. It reminds me that the land is still alive, even when people are not around. I usually follow the dirt path that runs along the fields. From there, the sky looks wider and clearer, and the lights from the farms are so faint, they barely disturb the stars. I like to look for Orion when I walk. I have done it so many times that it feels like a habit, something steady in a quiet life. That night felt normal at first. The air was cool, and the sky was clear. I had just found Orion when something strange crossed the sky. It was not a plane, and it was not a meteor. It moved too slowly, too smoothly. It looked like a large sphere of light, glowing white and pulsing softly, almost as if it were breathing. The sphere stopped in the air above the cornfield, near the old fence that separates my land from the Dawson family's property. It hovered there silently for a moment. Then it exploded. There was no sound, no shockwave. It simply burst apart, and dozens of small white lights drifted downward. They floated like glowing ashes, slow and gentle, settling onto the corn plants. Each light disappeared among the leaves without making a single noise. I stood frozen, my heart pounding, with the strong feeling that I had just seen something I was never meant to see. Less than 2 minutes later, I heard a sound, a soft crackling, then another, then another. It came from all around the field. The corn cobs began to split open from the inside, as if something was pushing outward. The dry husks tore apart, and something wet and pale forced its way through. What came out was shaped like a human. They were tall and slender, their bodies covered in a shiny wet membrane that peeled away as they stepped onto the ground. Some of them were already standing upright, moving with slow, careful motions, like newborn animals learning how to use their legs. The worst part was when one of them turned its head toward me. It had no clear face, no eyes or mouth I could fully describe, but I knew it saw me. I felt it. A cold wave of fear ran through my body. I ran. I ran across the gravel road, past the old rusty county line sign, and straight to my house. My lungs burned, and my legs felt weak by the time I reached the porch. I locked the door, pulled the blinds down, and stood there in the dark, trying to slow my breathing. Then I heard footsteps on the porch. I looked through the peephole, my hand shaking. Standing there was Bill, the guy from the grocery store, or at least someone who looked exactly like him. Same height, same hair, same clothes. But his face was empty, like all the emotion had been erased. Behind him, I could see two more figures. They were copies too, perfect replicas of people I knew. They knocked on the door, softly at first, then harder. That was when I understood something that terrified me more than their appearance. They were not attacking. They were not shouting or threatening. They were simply appearing, taking shapes they knew would be familiar, taking places they could fit into. It felt like they did not need to fight. They just needed time. The most horrifying thought was not what they were doing. It was what must have happened to the real people they were copying. My hands shook so badly I had to step away from the door. I moved upstairs without really seeing where I was going, stumbling on the steps, my heart racing. I closed the bedroom door behind me. As soon as I turned around, and I heard a soft rustling sound on the floor. Something was moving. Then long, cold fingers slid under the crack beneath the door and wrapped around my ankle. The touch was wet and slimy, like skin that had not finished forming. Before I could pull away, I felt something else. A sudden flash inside my chest. It was not light in my eyes. It came from deeper than that. It felt warm and invasive, like something was pushing into my thoughts, trying to read me, trying to understand who I was. My vision darkened at the edges. I felt something inside me pull back, like an instinct fighting to protect itself. I screamed and kicked out as hard as I could. The fingers released me instantly and slid back under the door. I fell backward, gasping for air. My ankle burned. When I looked at it, there was a red circular mark, in like a chemical burn. The knocking downstairs stopped. The silence that followed was wrong. It felt thick and heavy, like the house itself was holding its breath. I stayed perfectly still, barely daring to breathe. I knew then that they did not need to keep knocking. They had touched me. They had looked inside me. I do not know how long I stayed there on the floor. When dawn finally came, I forced myself to stand. I got dressed quickly and went back outside. I needed to see the field. I needed proof that I had not imagined everything. The cornfield looked damaged. Many of the ears were split open, torn from the inside, leaving damp, empty shells behind. As I walked between the rows, I saw footprints in the dirt, fresh ones, all of them leading toward the village. That was when I understood. They needed the cornfields to be born, and if the fields stayed, there would be more of them. I do not know if it was fear, desperation, or instinct, but I went to the shed and grabbed an old fuel can. I returned to the field, struck a match, and threw it. The fire spread fast, faster than I expected, racing through the dry plants and lighting up the valley like a sudden sunrise. For a moment, I truly believed I had done the right thing. It took less than 10 minutes for the sirens to arrive. I ran back to my house and waited, my heart pounding. A police car pulled up and stopped in front of my porch. When the door opened, my stomach dropped. It was Ben, the sheriff, or someone who looked exactly like him. He climbed the steps and knocked twice. I did not speak. Neither did he. He came inside, grabbed my arm with shocking strength, and slammed me against the wall. My head rang. He shoved me outside and pushed me toward the patrol car. I stumbled and fell into the back seat as he slammed the door shut. The car started without a word. As I tried to catch my breath, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. My hands were not cuffed. The real Ben would never forget that. It was not a mistake. It was ignorance. Ben loves basketball. He talks endlessly about the NBA, especially the Boston Celtics. So I asked him quietly how the Eastern Conference was doing this year. "I don't know," he said. That was all the proof I needed. He drove past the police station and toward the old feed factory on the edge of town. The smell hit me before we arrived, sweet, heavy, and rotten. The smell of fermented grain. The factory had been closed for years. Someone had started it again. As we approached the rusty silos, I realized why they were taking me there. If the cornfields were used to create replicas, the factory would be used to dispose of the originals. Then I saw the back door. It was not locked. He had not activated it. He did not know he had to. I counted under my breath. 1, 2, 3. And I threw myself out of the car before it stopped.